Welcome, everyone, to The Art of Pivoting Your Life. My name is Michelle Carboni. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and intuitive coach, among other things. And on this show, we've sort of pivoted to helping people with issues that they're going through. And today we're talking to Adrienne, who is on the phone with us today. And welcome. Thanks for being on with me today.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's dive in. Where are you at? What do you need assistance with?
So, my soon-to-be ex-husband of 29 years was recently diagnosed as being on the spectrum with level 1 autism, formerly known as Asperger's.
Right. ASD
And
also.
yes, ASPE, yes. And he was diagnosed probably back in March. He moved out in February. And so we've been navigating, the extreme communication difficulties, and we're just having quite a bit of time, quite a hard time just communicating, as always.
Yeah. Which is why you're getting divorced.
Which is why I'm getting divorced. So we are currently legally separated. We just filed the paperwork last week. And the reason we're going that route is just because of insurance purposes. I really was never able to work full time during the marriage, and I never realized it, but it really had more to do with a lack of support on his behalf. We have 3 grown adult children now, of course, but I really never had the support that I needed to feel confident in being able to work full time as well as raise a family. And I never knew why. Now I know.
All the pieces are clicking together.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I always felt like I can't work full time. I'll never be able to keep up with the house. But, I had a spouse, but something deep down told me that would never have worked out. And I said, I can't work full time. I'll never be able to, get dinner on the table, because he had to have dinner on the table, like clockwork every night of
Sure.
the week. And so, for some reason, I just never felt like I was capable. And I have a clinical doctorate, so it's not that I'm not capable.
Right.
I just didn't feel like I had the support.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, my career suffered and his career took off, because as many Aspies, I should say, not all, he's, in the engineering field, and he's done extremely well
Yeah.
for himself.
And what do you need from me? How can I guide you into figuring something out or handling something
I think
differently?
I think the biggest difficulty that I have is with my trauma response to
Mm,
him. So I think what I need help with primarily is, how do I keep myself from becoming reactive to him?
yeah.
Because it really does set me back,
Yeah.
sometimes by a day, sometimes by a week. But, conversations with him can really set me back.
Right.
So I think that's where I need the biggest help,
Yeah.
really.
I think so many women are going to be helped by this because so thank you
Yeah.
for, bringing that up, because I think it's really, really common, and even in non, ASPE NT relationships, but, to have these trauma responses come up when we're trying to
Yep.
communicate. And
Yep.
it's like, how do I stop doing that? And
How
so
do
I
I
think,
stop doing that?
yeah, so I think part of it is understanding what's happening. And so there's a great book, actually one of the other Cassandra's recommended, called Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. And
Mm-hmm.
in that, he talks about how when we're dealing with complex PTSD, which, obviously I'm not a doctor, so I can't say that's what you have, but most of us do have that are,
Let's just assume.
right? Like we can kind of assume that probably you're dealing with some
Yes,
of that.
we
And
can.
when we have that, one of the layers of things that happens is similar to in PTSD, but what it is a basically a flashback in your nervous system. So it's not a flashback to like a memory or a
Right.
specific moment, it's a flashback to a nervous system state. So
Right.
understanding that, I think, is one of the steps, is like, okay, I can understand that when I'm having a conversation with him that I may experience a nervous system flashback.
Response.
And
Flashback.
it's and I've experienced this like very dramatically not too long ago at a bar where I just like burst into tears and I had to go
Yep.
into the bathroom and cry. And
Yep.
but I knew what was happening, so I was working through it as best I could. But
Yeah.
in that moment, really, I just needed to remove myself from the situation. And I mean, being at a bar with a bunch of people
Right.
when you're upset
Kind
and
of hard
triggered,
to do.
that's not fun.
Yep.
No one's having
Not
fun with me
fun.
around. So,
No.
I ended up deciding, okay, it's best if I just leave. But, so understanding what's happening, I think is one of the first steps, is like,
That makes sense.
to tell yourself, okay, this is just my nervous system. I'm safe. So like even
Mhm.
yesterday, I got a crown and put in my mouth, and
Yes.
it was the first time I've
My
had
son's a
one.
dentist, so
Yeah.
I'm
So,
familiar.
and I don't know, I don't have struggles with the dentist, but I noticed my body was shaking, and
Hmm.
like I felt fine mentally, but I was like, my body feels like as he's drilling, my body's like, no, this is terrible or
Yes.
whatever. So I
Like your fight
literally,
or flight response
yeah,
went
like my
into
body was like,
effect.
I don't like this. So what I did as I was sitting there was just told myself, I'm safe, I'm secure, I am safe, I'm secure.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
you're okay. This is fine. Just like these kind of thoughts over and over again until my body
Yeah.
stopped doing that. And so that's one of the first things you can do, is work with your thoughts of,
Let's work with
okay,
my thoughts.
what are my
Okay.
what are the thoughts that are coming up, noticing that, or even reflecting back, like, okay, the last time we had a conversation, what was I thinking? Was I going
Right.
into it expecting it to be difficult? Because that's part of it too. When
Yes,
we
it
have
is.
that expectation of difficulty, we
Yeah.
create it, we're
Predisposed.
looking for it,
Yes.
right?
We're
Like,
looking for it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so like that Rumi quote, what you seek is seeking you, is
Yes.
so applicable here, because it's like we've told our mind, okay, hey, I'm looking for difficulty, please find it. And your mind's
This
like,
is going to
okay,
be
sure, no
difficult.
problem. I
Yeah.
got
This
you.
is going to be difficult. So so you almost get what you ask for
You do get
because
what you
you
ask
set
for.
yourself up. You do
Yeah, you're
get what
set.
you ask
So
for.
I think one of the other practices, and this is something I did when I was married, is I would like plan out how I wanted the conversation to go in a way. Like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what I want to say, because for me, I would get triggered a lot if, and just like ramble on about stupid stuff that he didn't want to hear about.
Yeah.
If I didn't plan out what I wanted to say, and get it to
Yep.
a very, they are very to the point. They want things short and sweet. They don't want all the
Um.
emotional
Yes.
bullshit that we want to tell them.
Yes.
So like
Yes.
getting down to the point. What is the point? And even treating it as like I need to find facts and figures, depending on what the conversation's about. So
Yes.
like
Very black and white
black and
thinking.
white, yeah. So like when my ex, we were talking about money stuff, and we
Yep.
didn't actually get lawyers when we got divorced.
Yeah.
We just
We
worked
haven't
out the
either.
money
And
stuff.
money's a trigger.
Yes, money's always a trigger. So what I discovered with us was sending an email was better. And
Yes. Yes.
I just listed out like, here's what I think is fair, and this is why. But it kept it, short and sweet. And like I owned a travel agency that I'm still being paid for. So he was like, well, I want half
Right.
of that money, and I was like, okay, well, then I want you to add up the value of all of your instruments. And
Right.
your car is newer than mine and paid off. and you're getting the riding mower and
Right.
and so I
Right.
just was like, so if you would go ahead and value your six basses, your five guitars, your drum kit, blah blah blah, and so I sort of pointed it out in a way that wasn't like accusatory, or I'm like, okay, that's great.
Emotional.
Here's what I need from you then is, if you
Right.
want half of this money that I'm getting, then I want half of this value of this stuff that really I paid for with my business.
And
Right. So, like, but I didn't
yes.
put it that way. But I was just like, these are okay. If you want to get into assets and splitting things up in this way, okay, sure. And here's what I need from you. And,
And you
I was
have
just,
to be very concrete. And that
yeah. So
you make a very good point there.
yeah, just keeping it simple as much as you can because they don't like it when we pontificate about the emotions and like they just want you to get to the point and
Yes.
you know
Well, they can't handle a lot of the emotional aspects of a conversation.
exactly.
They can't handle, the feelings that maybe arise when you discuss something.
Yeah, right?
And yeah, they really can't handle that, and they really would prefer it to be very black and white and very cut and
Yes.
dry,
Yes, exactly.
you know?
So yeah, figure out how can I say what I need to say in a way that's cut and dry.
Yeah.
And
And unfortunately, for a neurotypical individual such as myself and you as well, Michelle, that's a very unnatural way of speaking.
yeah.
It's a very unnatural, robotic, computer-like
Yeah.
way of speaking.
Yeah.
In most neurotypical conversations, you're going to discuss some level of emotion, some level of reaction, some
Mhm.
level of feeling,
Yep.
right?
Yep. But
And so it does require quite an adjustment to your normal way of speaking and your
yes.
normal way of doing things.
Yep.
And it can be very cold,
It is.
very cold.
It feels that way, right?
It
And
really
that's where
does.
I think the email, or for me at least,
Yes.
doing the email was better because it was easier for me to like just I would just word vomit everything I wanted to say and then
Yes.
I'm like, how can I consolidate this?
Yes.
And then it sort of got it out a little bit and then, I
And
just would
word vomit is a good way. I like
right?
I
I
like
love word
that.
vomiting.
I
Let's
like
just get it
that.
all out. And
Just word vomiting. Yes.
so that's a good way to, he and I had decided, like, I'm like, let's just do everything over email. And he was like, cool. That's, that was
Yeah.
fine with him. And, because I'm the one who left and he didn't really want to talk to me or
Right.
something. So, which
Right.
is fine.
That's
So,
interesting because I just came to that determination this past weekend, and we had been trying to communicate through text and phone calls for 7 months, and it of course it didn't work after he left, and it didn't work before he left for 29 years.
yeah,
And I finally said to him, if I have to, I'll block you from my phone so that to force myself to email you, because
right.
I think that email eliminates the back and forth. It eliminates any level of emotion.
Well,
There's no
and it eliminates the
expectation.
need to immediately respond.
Respond. Right. And there's no expectation that you're going to get a response in any timely fashion.
Yeah, right. Like
You send an
okay,
email.
you'll hear from me
Yep.
tomorrow. And then you have time to
Could
think
be
about what you want to say and how you want to respond.
right.
So
That's right.
if what
I
he
agree.
says does put you in a dysregulated nervous system state and you're in fight or flight freeze fawn, then you can take that time to calm down first before you
It's true.
type up your
It's
response.
true.
And you can really think about what you're saying. You could ask a friend to help, hey, does this make
Yes.
sense? And even like even using AI like Chat GPT to say, here's what I want to say. I need this said in a very short, concise way.
Wow, that's a great idea. I never
Right?
would have thought of that.
I
Yeah.
like as much as I don't like being forced to use AI, Facebook and Instagram,
Yes.
I do use it sometimes just because it can help you, reframe or give you some ideas of like
Yeah.
how you can say something differently. And
Right.
it does come in handy sometimes. So like it's
And it has
free.
to be not just saying it differently, it's saying it in the language that he can understand because, you know,
Right. Like I'm
they
talking
speak
to
their
an
own language.
engineer. I need this in engineer language.
I need
Right?
it right.
Like,
I need it in terms that he can understand because, and then I think the on the flip side of that as well, Michelle, is changing my expectation of his response,
yes,
right?
exactly.
Because
Exactly. Meeting
my
him where he's
my
at. You
meeting him
can't
where he's at,
you
yeah,
like you can't expect like and I think a lot of us fall into this trap of we see the potential of who they could be.
yes, yes.
And this is a huge issue I've had to really work on
So
because
have I.
like even with friends, you know, as I've dated, like all of that stuff is just like accepting someone for where they're at and not
Yeah,
where they could be because
yes.
you know, we have this gift of seeing their potential and seeing how, oh, if they would only do this. But
And you know, if I had a dime, if I had a dime for every time I said, but if you just would have said this instead,
mhm,
I'd be rich. I mean, that's a
right.
lot of dimes.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is they're not going to do that. That's just not how their
No, they're
brains
never.
work.
No, and I think I also think that there's something to be said for reminding yourself that it's almost as if you're not dealing with another human being, or you're dealing with a very different species of human,
Yeah, we're
because
just
they don't think, act, behave, speak anything like most human beings.
well,
They
it's
really
just
don't.
their brains function differently, right?
Very
Like
different. They're wired very
they're wired
differently.
differently. So it's
Um,
like I need to understand that I don't understand how they perceive and understand the world, and
yep,
they don't understand how I
not at
see
all.
and perceive and understand the world. So getting into that space of understanding that I don't understand
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
helpful because they can't most of them won't be able to even ponder what you are perceiving unless they've
And it does
chosen to
take a
do the
lot of
work.
work.
I'm sorry?
And it does take a lot of work on the behalf of the neurotypical individual,
Yeah.
you know, and the majority of the work is put in by the neurotypical, and the neurodiverse individual, you know, sometimes I believe is completely oblivious of how much work it takes
Mhm.
to relate to that person.
Yeah.
And they're not putting in even one iota of what you're putting in
Yeah, because they don't
as far
understand,
as, because they
you
don't
know.
understand.
Yeah. And
They, the, you know,
I do know
like,
like two of my best friends are neurodivergent and they've put in the work. So
mm-hmm.
they
It
do
is possible.
yeah, like they do understand. But I think the women that are Aspies are much more likely to put in the work because they tend to
Yes,
be
they
very
are.
empathetic, and the men tend to be more, you know, the Elon Musk type
Yes.
of attitude. My husband or my ex-husband, oh my gosh, he loved Elon. It was hilarious.
And the
And
Bill Gates
Sheldon
of the
from
world.
Big Bang Theory, right? Like
Sheldon. Yep.
but with meltdowns and you know all that fun
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So
And
yeah, it's
they're very unaware of the detriment. And they're very unaware of the effect that they have on the spouse.
they can be.
They
And now I will
really.
say, my ex did actually tell me a year before I left, he was like, I understand if you leave me.
Oh yeah, my ex has said the same thing. Like, you know, I blame myself. He says, and, you know, and he knows. He says, you know, I know I did wrong by you for all those years. I know I didn't treat you the way I should have treated you. I know I did it.
Yeah,
And you know, and he basically says, but you know what? That's been who I've been my whole life. So like, I thought sort of like I just got caught up in his tangled web.
yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and I think you know it's like we hope. Oh, okay, well now that you're aware, maybe
aware.
you'll change, maybe you'll grow.
No.
But it's really hard for
Yeah,
them to, you know, it takes a lot of work and and
it
even
does.
with neurotypicals, I mean, most people out there are not, I mean, it's getting better. More people are becoming more self-aware, but most people are not self-aware at
Yes.
all. We don't live in a society that
No.
encourages
No,
self-awareness.
and most people don't have the tools or the skill set to really affect change. People don't really change inherently, in my opinion, Michelle. In my opinion, people will modify their behavior and they may make adjustments, but inherently they don't change and they can't change.
I don't know.
And,
I think they can, just because I know the changes I've made in myself, but
hmm
it does take a lot of work. It takes
it
getting
does.
into those subconscious programs that are running your life, understanding that there are subconscious programs back there that you're not
Right.
even aware of, being aware of your ego, being aware of what your ego's doing to you, because
Yes.
our mind is not made to be nice to us. And
No, it's not.
understanding that, like, I'm sure your ex is like this too, like, they think the universe is out to get them. My ex-husband
Yes. Everybody's
constantly said
against
that.
them.
The universe is out to get me. Anything that went wrong, the universe hates me.
Yep.
And I'm
There's a
like,
black cloud following over
yeah.
me.
And I'm like, I get why you would think that, but the reason why things aren't working out is because you're expecting them to not work out.
Right.
And
Right.
so your mind is
And you
giving you,
already have set yourself up for failure.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
why I say, like, when you're going into a conversation, like if you were talking to him in person, going into it with as little expectations as possible, but as a general thing, expecting it to go well, and understand that, like, if you do get dysregulated, that it's okay to go, I'm dysregulated, I'm leaving the room right now, and to remove yourself
Yeah.
and to do whatever you
I
need to
have
do to calm down,
now that
right?
he's now that he's left the house, um, we've come to an agreement that he's not to be here when I'm home.
Hmm.
He's only to come here to to do things in the home because it's still the marital home
Right.
when I'm not here. Because there have been times where he has come here to do things, and the conversation gets to a point where I have to ask him to leave
Yeah.
because I am becoming dysregulated and I am starting to notice that my blood pressure is starting to go up and I'm starting to feel very unsettled.
Yeah.
And I've had to say to him, I think you need to leave.
Yeah.
you know so in order to avoid that situation, we've now come to the agreement that most, if not all, conversation will be through email.
Hmm.
And excuse me, and he's not to be at the home um, while I'm here. And he's supposed to give me a week's notice before he does come to the home.
Yeah.
And if he can't do whatever needs to be done in the home, then we have to agree to hire someone else to take care of it.
Yeah.
Because right now the home is still, owned 50-50.
Right.
So
Yeah. That's
those are some
definitely,
of the
that's
things.
good. Like, you've already, you're already taking those steps. Are you,
Yes.
and are you, what are you doing to take care of yourself right now?
Well, my primary focus for the last 7 months have been on, trying to bring in some extra income
Yeah.
because I do work part time, and because I always worked part time throughout the marriage. So that's really been my primary focus. And to find things, that can bring income that truly bring me joy and do not negatively affect my self-esteem. So I am a licensed medical professional, but I work part-time in that field. And I have found things like tutoring to be something that really I enjoy doing, that
Hmm.
brings me joy.
Good.
Babysitting for young children and being around young children has brought me joy.
Yeah.
Um, I've been spending more time with my neighbors, which was really not ever encouraged when he lived here.
Hmm.
And so I'm rediscovering my relationship with my neighbors, and that's really bringing me joy.
Oh, yeah.
Movie nights, and um, because he really never encouraged that because he couldn't socialize.
Sure. And
Um,
community is so
so
important.
yeah, he really was not one who had a sense of community, and he kind of forced me to withdraw from a lot of that. I've also started going back to church over the last month, and if this church doesn't, seem to be a good fit, then I will find another one that is a good fit, and
Sure.
I do plan to get more involved because I was always very involved in the church, but because of him, I withdrew from a lot of that community involvement
Yeah.
because he couldn't understand it and he discouraged it and he criticized it, was very critical of it.
Yeah.
So for years I was very involved in the PTA when my children were young, and And he would say things like, well, why do you bother? Nobody cares. Why do you bother? There's so many other people that could be doing that.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't his thing and because he truly couldn't understand that it brought me joy. I
Right.
also did a lot of volunteer work here in my county with the Medical Reserve Corps. Um, despite the fact that, again, he was not supportive of that. Um, he would sometimes praise me for doing it, but he really didn't understand the joy that it brought me. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting back to a lot of those things.
That's awesome. Um, can I suggest something else you might look into?
Sure.
So something that I've come to understand that, greatly affects us a lot of times when we've been in these kind of traumatic relationships is that we have trauma stored in our bodies. And the only way to get that out is to, work on it, right? And
Yes, it is.
so there's a lot of different methods out there. There's things like breath work, but something that I think is really effective, that I would totally recommend, that I recommend to everybody that will listen, is it's called Human Garage. And
Human Garage.
yeah, Human Garage. I love it. And
That's an interesting name.
they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook, they are on YouTube, but they are also on their website. They have like a community that you can join. It's free. And you can do these different uh like sort of challenges, basically. Like you can do the 1 day reset, and then when you do that, you can do the 3 day, and then they have a 28 day, so on and so forth. And
Hmm.
what they're doing is you're working with your fascia. And so you know how so many of us have
Yes.
autoimmune disorders, and
Yes.
right, like all these chronic illnesses, and like I've had chronic hip
Yes.
pain for many years.
So have I.
and
Chronic
um
back pain.
and part of it is, I mean, part of it with me is that I'm hypermobile, but the other part of it
I
is
am as
like,
well.
uh, you know, that is trauma trapped in my body and my
Right.
hips. And
Yep.
getting it out is important. And so these fascial maneuvers that they teach you, I mean, what I love about them and their mission is that it's like, it's all about getting this information out there for free so that people can heal themselves. Because
Wow.
the more people that we have that are healed in society, the more society in general is going to heal and elevate, and be a better place to live. So it's like,
Be a better place.
right, because all of us are walking around with all this trauma, and some of it's not even ours. Because if you think about it, your cells were inside your mom when she was inside your grandma.
Right.
So if something happened to your grandma that was impactful, especially while either before she was pregnant or after, like during, it's in your
There's
mom, which means
generational
it's in
trauma.
you.
Right. There's generational
It's that
trauma.
that's part of generational trauma, is the being passed down just from our cells and that cellular memory. And and even though every single cell in our body is completely new from, every 7
Mhm.
years minimum, it's like we still care. There's the memory. That's why we have scars. Like why do we have
Mhm.
scars if there's not a memory there telling those cells to do that same thing?
Right.
So
Right.
we have to understand, like, okay, our cells
Human.
have memory and they have memory of trauma, and it could be from generational trauma. Like I had a client who came to me for just fear in general. She's like, I'm afraid all the time. And when we go back,
Huh.
she goes back to being in the womb, and
Wow.
her mom is terrified of her father, and she put,
Hmm.
that fear got instilled into her as a fetus. And
Hmm.
so being able to release that fear, didn't want to leave either. But through
Mhm.
the processes we did in hypnotherapy, we were able to like get that fear to be released, because she doesn't need to carry
Wow.
the fear her mother had for her father while
That's
she was.
so powerful.
It's amazing, and it's so impactful in your life. I mean, can you imagine walking around for
Yeah, it's
50
very
years?
powerful.
It's incredible.
Yes.
So like understanding like that part about our body and our nervous system will help, because then, I was telling somebody this metaphor the other day. I was like, if you think about like any emotion you're carrying around, anything that could trigger you, it's like you're never going to not have that trigger. But doing the work to release it will mean like
Right.
instead of carrying around that trigger as a 50-pound boulder, and when that boulder gets activated, like say the boulder's floating above you and then you get activated and you're carrying this 50-pound boulder, it's like we can take that boulder and make it into a pebble. Like it's still there, it's still going to trigger you, but you can hold a pebble so much easier
It's
than
not as
this boulder.
impactful.
Yeah, it's not impacting, it's not bowling you over, it's not crushing you because you've worked with it and made it smaller and it's still there. It's
Right.
still in your nervous system. It's never going to not be there, but you can make it super, super small, even, maybe as small as a grain of rice, so that when you do get
Wow.
triggered, you're immediately able to get yourself out of it and not fall into that pattern. And part of that is working with your body to release that emotion and release that energy, but also part of it is working with your thoughts. So the other thing is like supporting yourself with your thoughts. So like when you
Wow.
are triggered, telling yourself, I am safe, I am secure, I feel safe, I feel secure. Putting your hands on your heart, holding yourself, in a hug, even stroke, like some of the moves that will help you, like as far as somatically, is like with your like vagus nerve, is like stroking your face from like ears to your chin, like just
Mhm.
stroking up and down. You doing that kind of same thing to your arms, like going, down
Mhm.
your arms, and that will help calm your nervous system. And
Like
breath
like
work,
brushing.
yeah, like, and breathing out longer than you breathe in, that's going to calm your heart rate down, because what happens when we get triggered, our heart rate will increase, which is what's
Right.
triggering our fight or flight, right? So
That's right.
understanding like, okay, I need to get my heart rate down. So breathe, consciously breathing and breathing out longer than you breathe in is going to
Right.
slow your heart rate down. It's going to calm that down, and that's going to trigger your nervous system to go, okay, I am safe, I'm secure. So like working on these different layers for yourself
Right.
when you're dealing with him, it's all about preparation, I think, in some ways, but it's all about also just understanding what's happening, giving yourself compassion, removing yourself if you need to, because I think so many of us get in this trap of like, we're
Yes,
not
we
able
do.
to, it's kind of like that don't go to bed angry.
Yeah.
Honestly, go to bed angry
Yeah.
because when you sleep, your nervous system's going to calm down and you're going to be able
Tries to
to,
reset.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
going to reset yourself and you're going to be able to come at the situation in a better, more conscious way, and it's going to feel better to you. So it's like,
I think
why?
it's important to acknowledge that, that we are experiencing a trauma response, because I
Yes.
don't think that I understood that for the longest time, you
Yeah, right.
know, and
Well,
I don't think I was aware, and I think that it went on for way too long. Had
yeah.
I been more aware.
Yeah, right. Like, well, and there's so much we're just discovering about how our bodies work and how the emotions tie into physical responses and how our mind works. Like
Yeah,
we just need to admit we don't know shit, and like, but what
exactly.
we do
And we
understand,
also, I think, and we also need to admit that, the body keeps the score. That's the
yes,
title of an
it's
excellent book.
amazing book. Love his work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I haven't had a chance to get my hands on it yet, but somebody else in another group, I think it might have been your group or another group,
yeah,
mentioned it. And it really, just the title alone speaks volumes,
yes,
that your body really is keeping the score of everything that's going on.
yeah.
And you see it manifest physically.
And not only that, but like we constantly get triggered back into childhood, back into
Yes,
those
we do.
traumas from childhood, and I think we end up in these kind of relationships because of our childhood and because of the
Yes, we
attachment
do.
styles that we got into. Like I'm disorganized, fearful avoidant. So
Mm.
like, and my ex was definitely avoidant. So like two
Mhm.
avoidant people can be together a really freaking long time because you don't talk about
Yeah.
anything. You don't feel safe talking about anything. So everything gets
Right.
swept under the rug until 20 plus years later, you're like, what the hell am I doing? What did I do to my
Right. What
life?
am I doing?
Why am I in
Right.
this marriage that I'm not getting my needs met? We went
Yes.
many years basically sexless, and like
Yes.
I wouldn't talk. I was so shamed. I wouldn't talk.
Yes.
I couldn't even tell my best friend. Like I
Yeah.
just suffered in silence for so long. And
So
like
did I.
so many of us
Yep.
do that, right? Like we just don't feel
Yes, we
safe.
do.
And so I
No.
think part
And
of,
we feel that no one wants to listen, and everyone's got their own, stuff going on in
yeah,
their lives. And you just learn to live with it,
yeah,
and you learn to settle for less than what you deserve.
yeah. And you're not even able to talk to your husband about it. Like,
No,
hey,
no,
why
you
aren't we
can't even
sleeping
talk to him
together?
about it.
You know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just
It's
so
terrible. I
it's
mean,
awful to live that
I don't
way.
fear I don't fear much in life. I really don't. But after having gone through a marriage of 29 years with someone on the spectrum, I fear for any woman that plans to marry someone who is possibly on the spectrum, is on the spectrum, because it's really a very difficult life. It's a life that you deserve so much more from. And I'm not saying that, that they should be alone. I'm just
Right.
saying that you've got to really think twice about entering into a relationship with someone on the spectrum,
Well, and I think you have to
because
understand what you have to be able to see them for where they're actually at. You know, like we were
yeah,
talking about earlier, not the person they could be. And I
no,
think that's true in all relationships, but also working on your own childhood and your own thing and understand, okay, am I a people pleaser? Am I
yeah,
codependent? Because
yeah,
those things are, you know, a magical compilation or
yes,
you know the word I mean,
concept,
like that
compilation, yes,
that converges into like this perfect situation where you don't feel like you have a voice and you let
yeah,
your partner speak badly to you. I mean, I can't tell you how many of
yes,
my friends were like, and even my family were like, I didn't like the way he talked to you because he talked down to
yes,
you and he, you
yes,
know, right, like
very
condescending.
condescending,
hmm
yeah,
and so
yeah,
and although I will say I talk condescendingly to myself at times, and
yeah, yeah,
I have to go, wait, this sounds condescending. I need to change this up because I
yeah.
don't want to be condescending to myself, but it's like that gets programmed in there because their
I
voice
think
is still talking to
I
you.
think Michelle, I think Michelle, one of the things that you have to keep in mind, even though we're discussing, dealing with individuals who are, high, quote unquote, high functioning, there is no learning curve when it comes to emotional intelligence. And, many of them have a very high intellect. However, their social and emotional intelligence is that of a much, much less
Yeah.
mature, developed individual. This is a developmental disorder. So, when you're dealing with a child, you know that eventually that child is going to learn, and there's a learning curve, and they're going to realize, oh, I shouldn't behave like that. Oh, I
Right.
shouldn't talk like that. Oh, I shouldn't say those things. And there's a learning curve. But with individuals with, you know, autism, there is no learning curve. They are developmentally delayed, and things just really do not improve.
Well,
You either have to meet them where they are
yeah.
and accept where they're at, or move on, and that's why many of us get divorced.
Yeah. Well, I do think that they can learn, but I don't think it's natural. Right? Like
It's
they
not
have
natural.
to, it's not there. They aren't able to take in what's happening around them so much. And I also think some of them feel too much and therefore shut it off so that they don't feel
Yes,
at all, right? Like they
yes,
disassociate. I think a lot
yes.
of them do that because it's like I saw a show recently and it was like she was talking about like, you know, imagine that you're a 130-watt bulb, but you're put into a 30-watt lamp. So it's
Mhm.
like because I do think I honestly and there is some information out there I think, but like I do think autism is a part of evolution.
Yes,
And
it is.
we're seeing the difficulty in adjusting to this different state. And so for me, I've decided to have a more compassionate view,
Mhm.
just because I understand, just because I do have friends that I've talked with about their experiences that, you know, I think I can have compassion for what it's like to live in a world not made for you. and
Yeah.
the difficulties there, and having compassion enables me to interact with any, because I mean, at least half the people out there are neurodivergent, and
Yep.
and so it enables me to have a conversation and have compassion and have a space where we can learn to understand each other better. Like with my friends, we can have these conversations and like go, oh wow, okay, that's how you're experiencing this, that's really interesting, this is how I'm
Yeah.
experiencing this, because we're
Yeah. I
really
think,
all experiencing the world in very vastly different ways. And so understand, I think that's one thing that we could understand, is that each of us, what you see as purple, it might be what I call blue. Right, like,
right. And I think that ultimately, when you're in a good place and you've worked through the trauma and you've worked through the stress and the anxiety that being married, being in an ND relationship for many years has caused, I think that ultimately the goal is to become, more compassionate, more understanding.
yeah,
But I think that that really depends on where you are in your journey
totally.
and
And you know what? There's
where
nothing
you,
wrong with being where you're at, wherever that is.
right,
Like,
right,
you are where you
exactly,
are. And like,
right,
for me, as someone, as a healer, I hold compassion for everyone, and
right.
try to, have compassion for wherever they're at in their journey, and know that there's nothing wrong with where anyone's at.
So does that mean that you have a good relationship now with your ex? Like, are you
I
friends?
mean,
Do
he
you,
doesn't live here, and
right,
he does not want a relationship with me, which is
okay.
fine. We actually do still share our logins for like Netflix and Disney and Hulu and
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Yeah.
So we every
Were
once
there
in a while,
children Were
we don't
there
have
children
kids. We
involved?
Yeah, we
Okay,
didn't
yeah,
have
that's what I was
kids. So
wondering. Because it's a
yeah, so
different dynamic when you've got children
it
because you do
is.
have to interact with that individual,
Yeah.
um,
We had
and you
dogs
do,
and cats who he
yeah,
kept. And so I do expect him to let me know, because one of them, he's old and has become blind and deaf, and and so I'm like, he's probably not going to live a lot longer, and plus he's
yeah,
almost 16 years old. So it's like I do expect him to let me know when our dog dies, and
sure.
hopefully
Now,
he would do that.
do you think that had you gotten to this place of healing and compassion and love while you were in the marriage, that the marriage could have been saved?
Yes and no. I would say in general, like if you took a general situation, yes, 100%. I think for us specifically, I was on a different path and journey than him spiritually. And for me, I need a partner who is in a similar realm to me
Right,
spiritually.
right, right.
But I did actually have hope at one point, like when I was doing this work, and I thought, oh, if we could do this forgiveness work, if we can,
Yeah,
if we can
yeah,
learn to communicate. And I really honestly,
yeah,
when I separated from him and said I'm going to move out, I was like, but I want to start over. I want us to like, I want you to take me on dates. I want you to, I want us to like learn how to communicate with each other, like
yeah,
in the ways that each of us need to communicate. Because I
yeah,
think there's a lot of things that happen in a relationship where you assume a lot of things. And one of the things that drove me absolutely nuts with him was he constantly told me how I felt about things and was
yep,
wrong,
yep,
and would not
yeah,
listen to me tell him,
yeah,
no, I don't feel that way. Like maybe I felt that way 10
right.
years ago, but
Well,
I
because they
think when you're in a
intellectualize
relationship a long
everything.
time, you don't allow your partner to change. And
Right.
I was like, I'm different. I'm not who I was when I was 22, which is when we got
Yes.
married. He was
Yes.
29 when we got married. You're not who you were
Oh,
then
wow.
either, right? So like
Yeah. Yeah.
we were young, and I was certainly an idiot at a lot of
Very young.
things when I was 22, and even
Hmm.
25 or 30. But like he wouldn't give me the space to be
Right. To
different.
be who you wanted to be. And I
Yeah.
think that part of the problem with individuals on the spectrum is that they use their intellect to navigate emotional situations.
Yeah.
And you can't intellectualize an emotional situation. You can try,
Yeah.
but it's like putting a Band-Aid on, a 6 foot gash on your leg.
Yeah.
You can try to stop the bleeding, but most likely you're not going to be very successful, and you're
Yeah.
not going to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's just a tactic that they will use, to try and intellectualize things.
Yeah. It's
And,
like Spock.
it's like Spock.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
exactly.
called my ex Spock. I'm
Exactly.
like, okay, Spock. Like,
I called him Sheldon. I would say, all right, Sheldon,
yeah.
we've had enough of that.
Right.
Like we don't really need to hear that anymore, Sheldon. Like we got it. We're picking up what you're putting down,
Right.
and it's like uncanny. But on the flip side of all of this, I will say that there are some perks to having a robot for a spouse. There are some perks to having someone who has an idyllic memory like my spouse
Mm-hmm.
did. Okay.
Yeah.
Yesterday, when I thought that the gasket on my stove was shredded and that I needed to purchase a new one, he immediately remembered that the stove was only 2 years old. The warranty was for 8 years. He immediately remembered that it's covered under the warranty. And that would have taken me probably a week to figure that out. I
Right.
don't remember when we bought the stove. I don't remember. It's a blur. But
Right.
having somebody with an idyllic memory like that is wonderful because he can remember details like I could never remember.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
there's
I say
definitely
to him,
pluses, right? Like,
there's definitely pluses. And, and as far as intellectually, like if you want to be married to a computer and if you want to be married to somebody who, can calculate a math problem in under 5 seconds without batting an eye, that's your guy.
right.
Okay. But if you're upset because you got a very upsetting email from work and you need somebody to make you feel better about it, that's not your go-to. He's
Right.
not your go-to.
Yeah.
He's not going to make you feel better. He's not, he's going to intellectualize it. And like you said, even if there is a learning curve, it's very unnatural and it's not from an authentic place.
Yeah.
It's very forced.
Yeah.
And
They have
and
to
you
like
realize
want.
that.
They have to want that,
Yes.
and it's rare.
Yes. It's very
And
rare and it's very difficult.
yeah, it's a
And
tough road. Even
you can
for me,
only
I was very disconnected from my emotions and
yes, I was
realized
too. And
that,
I
and
didn't
getting
yep,
reconnected to emotions sucks. I don't like being
it really
connected to my emotions all the time because I don't like all these feelings that come up and I when I don't know how to
yeah,
handle them. And but it's like
yeah.
I just go, okay, look, I'm feeling things and this is
Yep.
good. And I just tell
Yep.
myself, even though it sucks, it's good. Like it's good to
Yep.
feel and not
And I tell
disassociate.
myself, you went far too long with not enjoying your life. You
Mm-hmm.
went far too long conforming to the thoughts, needs, behaviors, and actions of another person and put your own thoughts and needs and actions aside.
Yeah.
Like it got to the point where my thoughts my thoughts were his thoughts.
Right.
I didn't have independent thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say to myself, wait a minute, that's not how I feel, and that's not what I think.
Right.
That's what he feels, and that's what he thinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's that pervasive.
Yeah.
And years ago, the DSM used to, before they really used the term autism widely, the DSM 20 somewhat years ago called it a pervasive developmental disorder because it is very pervasive.
Yeah.
And it pervades the norms. And so you'll notice that the way that you think changes, the way that you speak changes,
Mm-hmm.
the way that you react changes, and you conform to you meet them where they are, and you wind up turning into them almost,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So it's
sometimes that
interesting.
happens.
It's
It's
interesting when
interesting.
you say, I had to get in touch with my own emotions because I have become so much less emotional because I've developed his habits
Mm-hmm.
and become more or less stoic like he is.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get more in touch with my own emotions
Yeah. And it's
as
beautiful,
well.
right? And it's like,
And
whoa.
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's part of the
Well,
healing
thank
is
you,
like
Michelle. It
getting
is.
in touch with that. So, yay for
It is.
you. doing all the things.
Yes. Well, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate you taking the time
Yes,
to speak
this
with
was a
me and to
really
do
fun
the interview.
conversation.
You've given me some food for thought. I'm going to look up human garbage.
Yes, human garage, not garbage.
Human garage.
Garage,
I
yes,
wrote garbage.
garage.
Oh, that
Be
must
like
have been a
thinking of human
subliminal
garbage. What
message.
is Michelle talking about? There's no human garbage out
Human
there.
garage. Well, it sounds like you've got to get rid of the garbage. So that's probably why I thought of it. You got to get
Right?
rid of the garbage, right? Lots of garbage to let go of.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It was so nice to meet you.
Yes, you too. And I'll be posting this, so I'll
Thank
have
you.
it in the group, and
Wonderful.
maybe we'll see you on a support call sometime. And I hope
Yes.
you have a wonderful rest of your day. And
Yes, you as well.
to everyone out there watching, thanks for joining us for this fun conversation. And
Thanks,
we'll see
Michelle.
you next time. Thank you so
Speak to you
much.
soon. Have a good night.
You
Take
too.
care.